Welcome back for our fifth and final panel, Digital Citizen Engagement. According to data from Ofcom, 6% of all homes in the UK don't have access to the internet. That means 1.5 million people are offline. So what are the plans to engage with these citizens? Following the success of the NHS app, which has 22 million users and is one of the UK's most downloaded, government are now being encouraged to create and agree to increase mobile access to government services through the creation of a mobile app strategy. This will help engagement with the public, but how does government reach those who are digitally challenged on the edge of their communities? Through Building Digital UK, an executive agency as of April 2022, government is investing £5 billion to ensure that hard-to-reach areas have the same access to gigabit-capable broadband. There's a further £1 billion joint investment by the government and the 4 mobile network operators to increase 4G mobile coverage throughout the UK to 95%. Providing the internet connection is part of the solution, people need to know how to access. So in addition, support funded by ESFA will provide the essential skills training for those adults with low digital skills. So what can government glean from engagement with citizens? How can that information be stored, used and repurposed? What do we want today, tomorrow? Well, to help us navigate this topic and answer some of those big questions, I'm delighted to say we're joined by Stephen Kennedy, Director of Solutions at eGain Communications. Lawson is with us again, Director of Digital for the Tony Blair Institute. Elizabeth Anderson, COO of Digital Poverty Alliance, and Councillor Richard Pears, Portfolio Holder for Customers at Cornwall Council. As always, do feel welcome to use the Q&A tool to take part in our discussion. So, good afternoon to our 4 panelists for our final discussion. Lovely to see you all there. Steve, will you start us off just by explaining what eGain Communications does?
Sure. Thanks very much for the opportunity and join you guys on the panel. I'm really looking forward to the next 30 minutes or so. So from an eGain perspective, we help the government organizations provide a easy access to knowledge for their citizens, that the ability to actually retrieve questions or find answers to questions as they go through their day-to-day life within the government realms. And I think from an eGain perspective, we're providing that central knowledge environment that they can actually use across a multitude of platforms, especially as we go more and more into the app developed world. Surfacing the right information when citizens need it is going to be vitally important.
And how do you do it, Steve?
So that's actually a very, very good question. So from a delivery perspective, we're looking at using API technology where you can actually take questions that are being asked directly on apps or on websites and actually using that to search a knowledge base and then delivering an answer through any type of web front end that you might have. If you're talking about engagements through chat, you can actually front end those chats with automated environments so that you can answer things so much more quickly and accurately.
Rhiannon, you've been working in technology across government and the public sector for 15 years now. How important is digital engagement with citizens? Oh, have we got... Oh, Rhiannon, you froze there. Are you back?
I'm so sorry, everybody. I'm just moving once again, because apparently talking about internet not being great, my internet just went.
Oh my goodness. Well, I fell off the platform earlier. This is quite good that you're all mobile. Do you want me to repeat that question?
Yes,
I was
please.
Just saying
I'm so sorry.
No, don't you worry at all. You've certainly put a bit of sparkle into the final panel by being on the move there. Well, I was just saying that you've been working in technology in government and the public sector for about 15 years now, and just how important is digital engagement with citizens?
Yeah, it's super important, and we're now at a stage with citizens that digital is the way they engage with us. They are using gov.uk, they're filling forms in online, and especially after COVID, it was absolutely essential that people were able to access what they needed to be able to access through the internet. So data has to be available. The ways that people want to engage with government have to be available, and that has to be possible for people of all ages, of all abilities, and that's a real challenge for government. And the only way to make sure that we're providing citizens with what they need is through a lot of user research, is going and speaking to people and saying, what are you capable of, what can be done, and if you can't access this, how can we help you? So government does a lot around assisted digital. So forms are still available, actual handwritten forms, but also that there are ways that people can come into offices, they can go to their libraries, they can speak to all sorts of people who can help them engage with government through digital processes.
Fresh from the Tory party conference, Elizabeth and Richard. But Richard, how do you engage with your citizens, and how? Oh, look, she's gone again. She's run off, Rhiannon. She's disappeared. Where's she gone now? How do you engage with your citizens in Cornwall, and how smooth is it for you?
Sorry, I was literally just watching Rhiannon doing the sort of challenge Annika run around the place there, which is luckily I'm still in one place. Digital engagement, I mean, my God, everything has changed since COVID. And I think that's one of the first things we have to recognize, that a lot of my background is in digital. I used to run a technology company. So I was always sort of preaching to everyone in the council. But we have to recognize that COVID has changed the world. If I'd said digital meetings, everything being done digitally, we'd have said, yeah, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years. But guess what? It's happened, and it happened in a matter of a month or two. I was absolutely bowled over to see some of our councillors who perhaps my own prejudice, I would have thought, oh, there's no way he's ever going to get on the computer. But when faced with either being cut off or moving with the technology, I had some very, very elderly councillors saying, well, my grandson's got me set up, and guess what? I'm here for every meeting. And what really surprised and frightened me was a matter of a few weeks later, they'd be saying, Richard, well, what you do to change your background is you do this, this, and this. And I'd go, I didn't know that. Okay, you're now educating me. The world has changed. That's what it's been like for the councillors, but the same thing has of course happened for all of our residents. So we are now, I think, something like 98% or 99% of our engagements with our residents are digital. It's as simple as that. I mean, those statistics were unthinkable 2 years ago. Now they're reality. So we've actually put together, actually got signed off by Cabinet only a week or so ago. I think it's probably the largest digital programme anywhere in the UK. We're talking a £28 million programme down here to digitise everything that we can in the council. We want to allow people to connect with us through digital first, frankly, so that we can actually provide a better service to those who can't. You know what, I could spend all day talking about how we don't want to leave anyone behind. I'm sure those are going to be some questions that you come up with later on, so I'll leave that for them. But I believe that very, very shortly, people will expect to engage with their council and national government as well, but council is my primary focus, in the same way that we do with Amazon. I don't know about everyone else on this panel, who would think of picking up a telephone and calling Amazon if you had a problem? Do they have a telephone number? I don't even know. You go to your Amazon panel, everything you need is in front of you. If you have a question, it's answered. Nobody would think to telephone Amazon, or at least I certainly wouldn't. And that's, I think, where we're going to end up with local government in a very, very short space of time.
And Elizabeth, listening to Richard speak there, that's great, isn't it, for 95% of the population? But I know that Elizabeth will be wearing a very different hat for the 5% of the population. Just talk to us, Elizabeth, without sort of pulling it on a downer, but how bad is digital poverty, and how can those working in the public sector best support action on digital poverty so that people aren't excluded and can't be part of their community because they're not digitally enabled for whatever reason that might be?
Yeah, sure. I mean, all of that Richard's doing, for me, if I was living in Cornwall, sounds fantastic because I'd love that. But if I'm one of the 6% of the population, which is the stat that we go by, that is completely offline, or if I'm one of the nearly 15 million, according to Lloyds Banking Group data, who have very, very low levels of any digital engagement, that's not going to work for me. And it's not going to work for me, maybe because I don't have a device, maybe I can't afford the connectivity, maybe I don't have the skills to be able to use a machine. Maybe, you know, half of those people who are offline say the internet's not for me, it's not relevant to me in my life, and therefore we've got to shift those mindsets. Now, absolutely, we believe at the Digital Poverty Alliance that it's vital that people can engage how, when, and where they need with online services. We see digital as a basic right so that they can do all of those fantastic things that Richard is talking about. But we have to accept that there are millions of people who aren't ready for that. Just using one very small anecdote. I happen to live in Kent. In Kent, there's a car park where they've taken away the ability to pay with cash or even with card. You've got to pay on the app. It's a shopping centre car park, so some people are, but a lot of people aren't shopping in that shopping centre anymore because they don't have the digital skills, they don't have a mobile phone, they can't engage. So there's one side which is absolutely what Rhiannon was talking around in terms of assisted digital and how we can up the use of that so that not only are there the paper forms, but there's then also the signposting. And the signposting is vitally important in whatever way local authorities might be engaging with their citizens, their customers, because there are so many outlets for digital skills. I think it's something like 2/3 of people who say they're not confident would use a service to help them improve their digital skills if they knew where to look. There needs to be much more that goes to where people are. This is something that we're really, really passionate about. There is an assumption that, well, if you put it somewhere, people will come and find it. No, it's not necessarily if you build it, they will come. You've got to actually go out there and say, this is where you can find it in your community. You don't have to travel on a bus or a train and get to some special place. Put it where they are. And there are banks now. There's a national device bank, there's a national data bank, there's schemes that we run where you can, signpost people who need that help. But if people don't know it's there, they're not going to go hunting for it. And most of the time, where do you find something? You find it on the internet. So if you're not on the internet, you're already in that cycle.
Yeah, it's a bit chicken and egg there, isn't it? Steve, how could knowledge help in getting access to the right information at the right time for citizens?
So just listening to that whole conversation, I think it's very important that knowledge should be used as an education tool. It should be used as a signposting capability. And the fact that you can put it everywhere, just like Elizabeth was saying, the fact that you can drop it into a community organization, be it in a post office where somebody can go, they've got access to a store that has that capability. You've got a kiosk where they can go and get information very, very easily on what they're trying to do, whether it's their education on how to use it. Elizabeth was mentioning those 2/3 of people who, if they had that capability, would learn how to engage via a digital channel. That's where the knowledge is actually going to step into the frame and actually support what it is we're trying to do right now. Once people are connected, or once they have got access to that, then knowledge is delivering the right information at the right time when they need it. If you look at things like forms, getting those filled in correctly, you can signpost how those forms should be completed. If you've then got that ability to bring in the connect well in that same location, it means by using knowledge, you're getting it done first time. And let's be honest, how many times do we struggle filling in a form correctly for a government organization only to fill it in wrong? And that's where knowledge can start to actually bring the power of that accuracy and completing that task at hand.
Is knowledge something you're familiar with, Rhiannon, from your time working with the government in Wales?
Yeah, and I think the just to kind of follow on from what Stephen said, people fill in forms when a lot of the time when they're most stressed. There's forms around deaths, marriages, various other things, and the last thing you want to do is fill in a form if you've got money worries, if you've got whatever else, like that's just not fun. And so the government has taken steps to try and do this like fill something in once, and make sure that the government are holding the information and the knowledge to make sure that you don't have to keep filling in the forms over and over again. But sometimes you don't know where to look. And certainly with Wales, when I was working there, they're a bit further behind. They're doing a really great job, but they're a bit further behind than the UK government. And so that knowledge isn't always there yet. And actually people don't necessarily know where to go. And so it can be a bit more difficult to find things. With gov.uk, if you Google, I need to go bankrupt, for instance, and you need to fill in a form about that, again, like a stressful thing, it's probably almost certainly going to be the first thing that comes up in Google. So that's really helpful. But what happens if you don't have that access to the internet and things? That's where it starts to become difficult. So yeah, obviously knowledge is extremely important, and making sure the government has the information about you that means it's as easy as possible for you to fill in those forms at those stressful moments.
Yeah.
So Helen, can I just add something to that?
Yeah, sure.
Knowledge can also be used by the assisted side as well. So it's one source of information. So it doesn't matter whether I can use Google to find what I'm looking for, whether I go in store or go talk to somebody in a council building, we're getting the same information being delivered. And I think that's equally key. The fact that, yes, there are times when we can't do it online, we have to go and talk to somebody. But if we're all using the same source, it's the right source.
I hope we still will need to talk to some people. The only downside of everything being digital, my big bugbear is when you try and ring somebody now and you're just stuck on a long call forever. No one answers the phone anymore. I hope we don't lose that interaction. It's great going digital, but interaction is still really important. I think for all of us at any age, I don't think it matters whether you're young or old. I think some proper interaction is quite important. I just wanted to ask you, Richard, you very proudly said there that you've got a did you say £28 million plan I love your enthusiasm to digitise everything in Cornwall. Tell us the highlights. I mean, you could actually spend the rest of the panel telling us the rest of the time we have, but just the sort of highlights and the things that you're most looking forward to about that digitisation plan.
Well, I was going to say, I've got a lot of the things people have raised here have been addressed in our digital plan. I mean, one of them, for instance, being stuck on the phone for absolutely hours. We've implemented a chat bot with AI backing on our website so that you can go on, you can type in your issue, because let's face it, most of the issues people call the council about are quite simple ones. They're, when's my recycling going to be collected? Is my council tax due? That kind of thing. We've already plumbed this in, and it's learning at the moment, but it's learning at a geometric rate. So every week or every month, we turn it onto a new part of the council systems. So you can now go on there, type in, when's this going to happen? And it gives you the answer. And it can be 2 o'clock in the morning. You don't have to wait. You don't have to be on hold. It's immediate. And if you ask it something it then doesn't know the answer to, it simply transfers you to one of our call handlers who would normally have picked up the phone for you in our call center after you'd waited, but it transfers you to them and they can give you an immediate answer. And the best part about the chatbot is it actually is a more efficient use of our staff, because people are finding they can do 2 or 3 or even 4 conversations simultaneously. And instead of them being just stuck on one call waiting for you to answer or go and find something, they can be talking to 4 people simultaneously. So on the one hand, we've made our staff much more productive, but also that then frees up, because there's like a million questions I could answer. I've been writing little things down as everyone's been talking, but that frees up these people then to talk to people who perhaps are in digital poverty and who can only contact us on the phone. So we're now able to be more responsive to those people, because the digital side takes so much off the council's plate. And I think that's another thing to bear in mind, that if we fix the problem for 95% of people, then we can target our resources on the 5% who need the help. Again, down in Cornwall, another part of our digital implementation that we brought in, we're starting to loan devices to people through charities across Cornwall. We've only just started out, but we've already loaned out over 200 devices and I think 100 internet portals to people, along with training. it's not going to be very long. I mean, I've got some beautiful anecdotes about that. I met a man the other week who'd just come back into the workforce after 20 years working for one company, no digital skills whatsoever. And he said, you know, normally I would go to the local notice board and I'd pin up a thing, and I went there and there was no jobs board. I said, well, yeah, it's all on Facebook. And he said, that's what they told me. So I figured I'd better learn this, otherwise I'm not going to have a job. So he came in, he got digital skills, he was loaned a laptop, he's now on Facebook, he's engaging with his family in a way that he'd never been able to do before because he was a long way away from them. So by the loan of a £200 laptop, not only have we got this man back into employment, not only have we made his interactions with the council a lot easier, we've changed his life. And I think it's not going to be very long before we start doing cost-benefit analysis and saying it is cheaper for us to give someone a £200 laptop than it is for them to come into our offices, discuss things, have to get pushed around from pillar to post with all the associated difficulties of, oh, don't worry, we'll email you about that. We can't. Right, well, we're going to need to mail. You know, each, as the system becomes more and more digital, which it inevitably will, there's no way of undigitizing, it's actually going to become more and more difficult to go back to old ways of doing things, you know, paying people in cash. I mean, how much are a lot of councils and governments and, you know, government departments around the country spending to have to deal with cash for an increasingly smaller and smaller and smaller number of people? Because when that number of people gets very small, it's just not economical to do it anymore. And so that's going to become a problem very quickly. One thing we're trying to get ahead of, if we can give you the training, we can change your life if you're willing to engage with it. And again, it just makes our processes a lot quicker.
That's good to hear, though, that you're using, you know, the 95% who are digitally enabled to try and support the 5% who aren't. I'm sure that's music to Elizabeth's ears. But Elizabeth, do you have specific programs that people who are in need can be referred to?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the programs that we are running at the moment is called Tech for Families, and at the moment it's running in 5 areas, but from the beginning of 2023 it will roll out across the country. And this is where people who have school-age children who need to be able to access education online, we know that I think it's something like 60% of kids have said that when they can get online, their education is so much easier, and about half of homework is set online now. But you've still got 42% of children who don't have a device or the connection that they need. So there's a massive imbalance.
42%.
42%. That is nominate data. So that is absolutely very well confirmed. So we're running Tech for Families, actually alongside Currys PLC, because we want to ensure that as many families as possible can get those machines. We've also been working on a Tech for Teachers scheme. And I know we've definitely granted some devices in Cornwall, which hopefully Richard knows about, for teachers who also don't have the access that they need. Again, about half of teachers during the pandemic didn't have a device, which was weird because they were meant to be teaching children online. But how do you do that if you don't have a computer to do it? So those are just a couple of them. We're also doing a public consultation at the moment as we head towards writing a national delivery plan to target how to end digital poverty by the end of the decade, where we're trying to learn from the fantastic work that a multitude of organisations, whether they're local authorities, whether they are other charities, whether they are government bodies, whether they are industry, and learn from some of the things that have worked and indeed some of the things that haven't worked. It's not just giving devices often doesn't solve the problem if people don't know what they're going to do when to take it out of the box, which is why we try and make our programs a little bit realistic.
Well, it'd be great to think we could end digital poverty by the end of the decade and hopefully sooner. Steve, can knowledge be embedded then in the government apps that citizens are using to provide more information, more training?
Yes, very much so. We're seeing that in general, that apps are being used out there, and what better information than the knowledge that you can access everywhere. And I think if you look at the NHS apps where there is such a high volume of users that have currently got it, being able to embed pure knowledge in there will be such an advantage, giving people the right advice when they need it, how to approach different situations. So yeah, taking the knowledge and embedding it in an app makes it so much more accessible to everybody. And the app doesn't have to be limited just to a phone. It could be a website. So there's so many different places that you could put it. Like I was talking earlier on, we have customers who use kiosks in stores. In locations where people where there is a traffic of people, you can put kiosks with knowledge and all the guidance that is available from that perspective. So very much so, embedding it directly in an app gives greater access.
Rhiannon, the pandemic did change things, and it's a fast-track digital transformation. I know it was already going on, but suddenly we didn't have a choice. People who hadn't adapted to it just had to get on with it. Organisations, the public sector, the NHS had to very quickly get on board because of the circumstances we all found ourselves in globally. The NHS app has got 22 million followers, I think, or users, if you're not followers, users. The pandemic really did change things for the better on this front, didn't it?
Yeah, massively so. And I think a really good example of this is from within central government. I ran a project called Project Unblock. And of course, government went from one day working in the office, most people every single day, to suddenly being at home. And there are organisations that couldn't talk to one another. So, as an example, maybe HMRC couldn't talk to Home Office. Conferencing tools weren't open to each other. And so very fast, I think within about 2 or 3 weeks, we managed to get every single government department able to talk to one another through video conferencing tools. That is something that would have taken us a year, 18 months without COVID, because it was so essential. And that is something that has happened in every organisation. Everyone has had to do this. And interoperability has become like a big word across organisations. Things have to work together. No longer can we all be working on different systems, and everything has to work together. And so, it's been a massive push. And clearly, we all could have done without COVID, and I'm not going to downplay how horrific it was. However, the benefits that came from it, I think, have been, around digital transformation and getting everyone into a place where we're able to do this. Like, how many conferences happened like this 2 years ago? People didn't do video conferencing calling unless one person lived in Australia and another in the UK. That just wouldn't happen. So I think there have been some real positives on that front, and actually showing organisations how fast they can move, and saying, look, an MVP is absolutely fine. We can create the bare minimum and add onto it. And I think previously we were saying we've got to get to a point where it's done. And I think we've realised that things aren't done. And the chatbots are a really good example. Lots of organisations used to roll out a chatbot, and then that was it. A good chatbot will be updated and maintained constantly, because otherwise it becomes legacy very, very fast, and is completely useless to everybody. The same with an app. They have to be updated constantly. So I think we've kind of proved to ourselves that it's really possible to move fast, and the citizens and people are very, very happy with the bare minimum, as long as it is a minimum viable product. It's accessible, it's secure, it meets user needs, and it's written in a way that people truly understand.
I'm smiling because my 13-year-old's just come home from school, forgetting that this is a live studio, Jack, and we're in a virtual conference. But I think as well what you're saying about events like this, I mean, these events, we normally would do these live and in person. These kinds of events were put together because of the pandemic, yet we're out of the pandemic and we're still doing them because we've seen the value of creating a virtual platform and connecting people digitally, and being able to use the platform that way. So that's a sort of good example. We are drawing to a close, but Richard, what does the citizen want today, tomorrow? Big question for you to end on.
Oh God, I think the average citizen, and again, digital poverty, this isn't everyone, but we're addressing that. But the citizen is going to want more and more and more. Our one customer record that we're bringing in really ties into a lot of what the other panelists have been talking about here. Being able to log on, have all of your data in one place, and have all the information you need in one place, which then allows you to go on and want to fill out one of those forms that you need to fill out Well, guess what? The system already knows who you are, where you live, all the basic stuff. So you can click on there and then you can just fill out the important information that you need to fill out. This is actually very much how the NHS app is now working. And of course, we're going to see this tied in more and more through other government systems. The NHS app was a very good example of this. I went on it and oh, I can change where my prescriptions are delivered. Actually, it would be handier to have that up there. I didn't know you could do that. Oh, should I? Oh, I can flag this up. Oh, I'll register as an organ donor as well. I'll do this. All of these things I did in minutes on the app. I would never have thought to do a lot of them, but I did them because they were there in front of me. Was it onerous? Of course not. I just ticked boxes and pressed OK on a lot of things. It was so simple. It was so easy. Had I tried, and I wouldn't, to have done all of that the traditional way, how many phone calls or visits or forms I mean, I don't know how long that would have taken, but we are talking a very significant amount of time. And then
very quick.
I offered it to them and they did the same thing. You know,
very quick final word for Steve and Elizabeth. Steve, citizens want more and more. I'm guessing you're going to agree with that.
I am, yes, and I think one of the biggest things is they're going to want choice. They want to be able to choose how they want to engage with us, whether it's via a digital or whether it's a mixture of everything. And I think as we do consider the digital poverty side of things, even they need a way to access the systems that we have without having to be forced down that road. You know, that whole concept of you can only pay for parking now via an app, that doesn't work. I've been in situations where I live where I've had to help people pay for parking. They've given me the cash and I've paid for parking digitally because there's no other alternative. I think that's what citizens are going to want more and more, is that alternative choice to decide how I want to engage.
And Elizabeth, you know, as we all face the current cost of living crisis, why is it important that digital poverty is prioritised?
We believe that digital poverty is one of the main predetermining factors of poverty. Where do you find education, training? Where do you find a job, exactly as we heard earlier? How do you access healthcare? All of these are things you do online. Where do you find a better electricity deal? Online. So this is absolutely fundamental. It is a route for people out of poverty. Digital is no longer a luxury. It's not something that sits on top. It's something that sits underneath. So we have to prioritize it in that way. And I'd love to just do a quick plug that if people visit digitalpovertyalliance.org, join our hub, you can keep going on this conversation. You can find people on there who will help you to support the people that you need to work with in your area.
Fantastic. I was going to say, just a final thought to you, Rhiannon.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I just wanted to say that anyone who is interested in supporting people with their digital needs, I've just volunteered for my local library. Lots and lots of libraries have voluntary positions open. So most of the time it's to help people set up emails, set up Facebook, understand how to use their phone. So you don't need to have masses of qualifications or anything. It's all quite basic stuff. It's just some people need a bit of help and need a bit of confidence. So if you just Google volunteer, like digital champion volunteer, I think is probably the best thing to Google, and it's super, super easy to get involved.
Oh, that's brilliant. And well done for doing that. We could all spend a bit of time, hopefully, helping people understand digital better. It's been a pleasure to have you all on my last panel. I've really enjoyed the discussion. So thank you to the final panelists of the day, to Steve, Elizabeth, Richard, and to Rhiannon for actually twice this afternoon and having such a strong conversation to end on. Thank you to everyone as well who's taken part today. We have covered a whole range of challenges, opportunities and solutions as we discuss public sector digital transformation alongside the digital roadmap. Whether you're one of our many excellent panelists who've been with us today, or if you're part of our audience, it's been sending in some questions, a big thank you here at PSE 365. Thank you also to our fantastic partners, without whom, of course, events like this wouldn't take place. Our next event on public sector levelling up is on the 17th of November, so do please share this with your colleagues, as we'd love to welcome more new faces to the platform. If you're a winner in our gamification challenge, the PSE team will be in touch to discuss your prize options. And in addition to gamification, today's event, as you remember, was CPD certified, with 1 CPD point earned for every hour of live content watched. So if you'd like your certificate, just email marketing@Cognitive Publishing. I'll sort you out. Me and everyone at PSE 365, thank you for being a great audience. Hope you enjoyed the conversations. Have a great rest of the day.